Imagine a world where games look like this. A world where animation is this fluid. And finally, a world where physics are this powerful, this impactful in real-time dynamic gameplay. Well, believe it or not, this may be coming sooner than later if Phil Spencer's recent comments are to be believed. And according to his recent comments, Microsoft are working on more than just one next generation Xbox. So if you watched Microsoft's E3 2018 press conference, you know that not only did they show a ton of games, they were also very transparent. Many people were absolutely stunned when Microsoft announced the acquisition of 5 brand new studios. This is massive news, adding those 5 to the already 6 creative teams they've had. This is big news for Xbox. Everybody wants newer and bigger games. We all agree it is absolutely essential and critical to the brand. But in my opinion, that was not the most interesting thing Phil Spencer announced on that stage.
And of course, our hardware team, the same team that delivered unprecedented performance with Xbox One X, is deep into architecting the next Xbox consoles.
Wait a second, hang on. Did he just say what I think he just said?
The next Xbox consoles.
So an already interesting conference gets even more interesting when Phil does the unthinkable, confirming next generation Xbox technology potentially years away from launch, which it has never been done before officially on a stage like this. And secondly, he says his hardware teams are deep in the development of the next Xbox consoles with an S, implying that there are more than one. So of course Phil's comments were already pretty interesting, but fast forward a day or so and we now have an insider that claims to have seen confidential information. This insider says not only is the next generation Xbox targeting the year 2020, but it has the codename Scarlet. Furthermore, there is more than one SKU of this box. Now some of you may be really surprised by this. I myself am not so surprised, and I'll tell you why. Now, for one, he could be referring to different prototypes they have in development. If you remember, we did a story a long time ago on this channel where we talked about different iterative upgrades that Microsoft were working on. The Xbox One X was not the only version of its iterative self. There were lesser powerful versions of the Xbox One X out there. They ended up waiting the year, going with more powerful hardware. They could be testing out several chipsets, RAM configurations, things like that, all at once. Now, it's worth considering that prototypes are never counted among production models when it comes to consoles. Usually you have a base model, a slim, and now, for the first time in history, you have more powerful iterative upgrades of the same exact console. Now, I hear you. What am I getting at here? Well, bear with me, but I'm going to throw out maybe something to think about, something I think they could do for good reason. So let's begin our journey down the rabbit hole. For those that have been watching this channel for quite some time, you know that the main bottleneck of the Xbox One X and the PlayStation 4 Pro for that matter is the CPU. Meaning, if they got rid of the CPU in the Xbox One X, somehow magically plopped in something powered by Ryzen, which will be the APU technology that powers next generation Xboxes and PlayStations, the Xbox One X will be able to do pretty much everything I showed you at the beginning of this video, at least in some form. Most of that's going to come through software optimization, but much of that potential will be unlocked for things like better animation, better destruction, more complex AI and geometry, as well as higher frame rates, not to mention physics. Now that all sounds great, right? But what is the point? Well, my point is, Microsoft could potentially launch next generation Xboxes with the GPU or something slightly faster than the Xbox One X, just with the addition of Ryzen cores instead of Jaguar cores, and get away with that 100% scot-free and still deliver the next generation console features that I just mentioned. Now, I'm sure, for good reason, I am hearing those in the comments say, well, why would they do that? Well, put simply, price. We've all seen consoles in the past launch with two different SKUs, that be the 360 or the PS3, each SKU being $100 differential. Usually that price gets you additional hard drive space. Well, there is no need to do this anymore with the advent of easily accessible external hard drive support for consoles. There is no need to spend all of that money on internal drives when you have already invested potentially in a massive 5 or 6 terabyte external hard drive that you can then unplug and take anywhere. So to sum it up, there would be two SKUs of the next generation Xbox come 2020-2021. The base model would have maybe a 6 or 7 teraflop GPU. The higher end model, which would probably clock in at about $100 more expensive, would have anywhere from 10 to 12 teraflops in its GPU capability. But importantly, both models would share those Ryzen APU cores, meaning neither of them are held back from doing what I believe the next generation are really going to focus on: animations, physics, AI, simulation, geometry, all of these things that you need a great CPU to tackle. Now that sounds great and all, but what about the power of the base model's GPU? Would it not be enough to last another 10 years? Well, I think it's going to be quite some time before they have to push resolutions below 1080p and below 30 frames per second on that base model if they were in some crazy world going to do this. I think there's enough juice in 6 teraflops, 7 teraflops to keep games at good resolutions and visuals for a very long time. That's like taking an RX 580 or a 1060 and saying, well, in 5 or 7 years, I'm going to have to go below 1080p and 30 frames per second on everything. I just don't see that being the case. I think that things are just at such high resolutions now with the X that by the time the end of the next generation comes with maybe 7 teraflops, they could still keep things at 1080p 30 frames per second. Yes, would you be behind the higher end model clocking in at almost double the speed? Yes, you would. Much like today's models, you would be compromising on visuals, but keep in mind, things are still going to look great, and you would be paying $100 less, potentially as little as $300 to $350 US for this base model. I think that's very important for Microsoft to get their foot in the door, to get an advantage with the next generation, to offer something that is of a lower price and will deliver amazing visuals from day one. So I'm not sure how much of this made sense to how many of you out there, but my theory is that they could offer two models, one substantially slower on the GPU side, but with the same CPU as the higher end, faster GPU'd variant of the same box. I think performance is high enough now on the lower end GPU to where they wouldn't have to drop resolutions below 1080p while at 30 frames per second for quite some time, especially on a console. And at the very least, I'm sure we can all agree that it's an interesting theory, hypothesis, whatever you want to call it. Yes, I am quite literally the only person on the planet saying this right now, and it'll be interesting to see how many more pick this up and run with it as time goes on. Really, ultimately, it's an ultimate competitive advantage if Microsoft pulled this off to launch a next generation console with the CPU needed to keep up with next generation games at $300 or so. That is a serious advantage, something to consider. So let me know what you guys think down below. Is this even feasible? And if it is, would you buy the $300 version over, say, maybe the $400 version that has about double the performance? This version would keep resolutions and frame rates higher for longer throughout the generation, give you better performance, things like that. Let me know. It's a very curious situation. I want to know what you think. And really, this is a part of the video where I ask you to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. Maybe share it if you get a minute. Subscribe if you're new. And of course, if you like this content, maybe check out the Patreon linked down below. We got game giveaways. You can become an RDX podcast sponsor, come on to the podcast yourself, and so much more. Check that out. That link's there. And of course, I'll link the last RDX podcast down below in the description. Thank you guys so much. I'm Dealer. I'm out.